it's my great pleasure this morning to introduce our guest speaker and our panelists who are going to talk about capacity building and developing sustainability. We have as our guest speaker Breda Lymer, and Breda, who is known to very many of you, I think, is Chief Executive Officer of West Training and Development. She has very long experience in the community and statutory and academic sectors, and also indeed in the business world, and as a trade unionist. In fact, really, Breda's CV is quite remarkable. It touches on all of the key sectors in our country at the present time. She has worked with SIP2, with Aer Lingus, with An Garda Síochána, and I'm not going to go through the entire list, but it is very important and impressive and a tremendous resource for us in our LGBT community. But Breda as also plays a very considerable role in the volunteer and volunteering sector, and she's on the board of Volunteering Ireland, which is a terrific organisation. On top of all that, she has a master's in rural development. So I think we are very, very pleased and fortunate indeed to have Breda with us this morning. But it's my great pleasure to introduce Breda to speak to us this morning. Thanks very much for coming, Breda. You're very welcome.
Oh God. Good morning, friends, and thank you for the warm welcome. As you've said, my name is Breda Lymer, and I'm based in Galway. I work in the west of Ireland, predominantly in the community and voluntary sector, and have done for a number of years now. And my involvement with the LGBT community has been through working with family resource centres and community development projects, but also working in a voluntary capacity with a number of organisations in the west of Ireland, predominantly the AMAC LGBT Galway group. And today we were asking to talk about capacity building and what does it mean, and what we have all the language and all the theory and all of it, but the actual practice of it on the ground, what does that mean for us who work in communities that are very diverse, quite diverse in terms of rural, sparsely populated areas to urban areas, like take Galway City as being an example. So if we were to look at how do we work towards creating an environment or an atmosphere in Irish society where the LGBT community itself feels confident enough to engage in activism focused on LGBT issues. Now, for a lot of national organisations, you might say, well, sure, we're doing that anyway. But actually on the ground, it's quite different, and that would be my experience of working on the ground. Often the progress at this level happens quite slowly, and as a result is often not recognised. And you think of the huge strides that have been taken in recent years, a journey of a place where LGBT people, have been persecuted by the church and state. And after all, it is only 20 years since the decriminalisation of homosexual acts took place. So, and here we are now in 2010, where an openly gay person can consider running for the president of the country, and where his record of championing gay rights is considered one of his greatest attributes. So I think there has been considerable progress in that. So we have come a long way from decriminalisation to civil partnership, although at times it has been gradual and often quite a difficult process. So, in a way, that it has to continue. This, if it doesn't continue, then capacity building at a local community level will become far more difficult than it is now. So, where does capacity building in itself need to occur? I'm going to cut some of this short because of time, and I have 15 minutes to get through this. So if I'm rushing it, my apologies. I obviously want to try and cover everything and can't, but anyway. So I believe, we're talking about where does it occur. I believe it occurs using existing community and voluntary infrastructure and programmes. There's quite a lot of them out there in this country, an elaborate and sophisticated community and voluntary structure has been developed over the last 20 years. And since the early 90s, the Programme for Better Local Government in the community and voluntary sector has become an integral part of the decision-making at local government level. And unfortunately, right now, we're seeing that being dismantled in a lot of ways, which is a great shame, because if you look at the commitment and the work that went in from the community and voluntary sector over the years to make things happen, to have our voices heard, and they were being heard and were being responded to, and now in the last couple of years we're seeing it being dismantled. It's quite disheartening in a lot of ways, and feeds into what you were saying about how things change. However, I mean, I'm struck by, we have to, no matter how small a group we are or how small a community we are, we can still make a difference. And the Dalai Lama made a statement once where he said that if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. We have to continue to make that difference. The White Paper on Building Relationship between Government and Community and Voluntary Sector and the Task Force Report on Active Citizenship demonstrates recognition for the sector at a national level. And following on from the work of LGBT activist groups in recent years, the LGBT community has become more recognised by most, if not all, targeted community development programmes. Even though sometimes I think that is quite tokenistic in some places, but anyway, we'll look at that again. Many established community development programmes have amassed great experience and built up experience over the years, and this experience needs to be directed towards the challenge of building capacity within LGBT communities. The community and voluntary groups and associations need to lead the way in welcoming and celebrating LGBT communities. And it's amazing the amount of community development projects and programmes that would say, yes, they're dealing with marginalised and disadvantaged communities, but yet the LGBT community is not on their work plan as such. So as long as LGBT community actually feel unwelcome to participate in many things, even, say your local arts group, a local community council or the local GAA, they will never feel welcome in schools or places of work. So it starts in the community and starts to build from that. My own involvement with LGBT work in the west of Ireland did not start with the establishment of LGBT groups. There were none to the best of my knowledge when we were working as a support agency. Rather, it started with an effort to make existing community groups, such as the community development projects and family resource centres, more LGBT friendly in the work that they do. Broad-based community and voluntary organisations need to see that you don't have to be one of the LGBT community to be concerned with equality for LGBT communities, and most importantly, you don't need to have all the answers to get involved in their work. In our work in the LGBT community, we would have found that, as I said, we would work. I suppose the very first piece of work we did with the LGBT community was a piece of work that we did with a project that was based in a very rural, isolated part of the Galway, where a development worker came to us and asked for help to support a family whose son had come out. Now, he'd left school, did his Leaving Cert and went to America for a number of years and came back and came out to his family. And they did not know how to cope with that. And there was no resources in that local community for them. So they came to us as a support agency in the area and said, do you know anybody, or is there anyone we can talk to about this? And of course, we picked up the phone to Glenn. And it was the one national organisation that we would have had some contact with, informally more than on a formal basis. But for us, it was like we were able to make a connection between a national organisation that could support the local project to support this family. And then from that, we decided that we would, work with the other community development projects in the region. There were 54 of them at the time, and based on islands, based in, as I said, very isolated community groups areas, as well as in the major towns and cities. And we asked the projects to come together to look at addressing LGBT issues, or maybe looking at how would you support, how would you put people in contact with. And we discovered that there was absolutely no projects, no LGBT groups providing this type of support that we needed for the projects in the area or in the region. There were some social groups and had been holding their own, literally in their own areas, but there was nobody providing support. There was no telephone lines, nothing. So we worked with a number of the projects, family resource centres and community development projects, and ourselves. And out of that, we developed a code of practice on working with the LGBT community and how would you involve groups. With the help of the Dundalk Outcomers, who gave us posters and things like that, we were able to promote LGBT-friendly projects. We did the posters in Irish and in Polish, and started to create some bit of movement and a level of activism within the community. It was very small, but again, as I said, small can work as well. And we at that time had great support from Glenn. And Kieran McKinney, who was a development worker at the time, worked with us in the region and did a lot of training with us and support with us and worked with the LGBT groups as they came together. So for that organisation to be able to come out, even though it wasn't really part of their remit, but they were still able to they've broadened it since, obviously, but at the time they were, hugely helpful to us in creating that code of practice. And as a result of it being published at regional level, then it was taken to national, and the Department of Community, Rural and Gaeltacht Affairs, as it was at the time, convened a group to publish that code of practice at national level. So again, it's one piece of work that shows something that starts out really, really small, builds at county level, and then into a regional level. And if you can get the support of, departments like Community Rural and others, then it can be promoted into a national piece of work, which is hugely crucial, because it's the voice of the local people being heard. And for me, that's how you influence policy and how policy works in this country. So that was one, for us, one good example. And that network still exists in the West region. In our work to support community, to form LGBT support and advocacy groups, we would have really felt it crucially important that there's a need to have a space where LGBT people can come together and discuss their own experiences, where that place is safe, and where people can voice their opinions, where you start out like sharing your dream for what it is you want to do in your community. And where out of that comes your vision for the work and your main aims and objectives and how you can progress that. And it starts small, but obviously there's a stage where, capacity building, where you can support a group to do that for themselves. But there's obviously a time then when the group itself is able to identify its own vision for change, where there's a need to be able to share their skills, because there's huge skills in the community, but it's tapping into those as a resource for the groups. There's a need, obviously, to challenge the whole area of homophobia. It's a massive piece of work, and very difficult for people to take on at times, and needs huge support. And there's obviously a need to support each other to advocate for the work. And our experience in Galway would say that there is a need for more access to for people to be able to network with each other. There's a need for more information. There's a need for support. There's a need for support for people. People need to be able to come into communities of a higher population, I suppose, where you're not so easily identifiable. If you want information, you want to be able to come out and in a safe place or with safe people around you. In rural areas, unfortunately, that's not the experience, and it's quite difficult, and there is no access as such to that kind of support, and we need to look at that. So how does capacity building need to occur? And then we'll have to look at really like what are the gifts and strengths and talents we bring to that, and how do we tap into it. I mean, the theory of it and the academic kind of notion of what capacity building is all very fine and well, but actually boil it down to what's happening on the ground. And I think it's very much about sharing those gifts with each other, as I said, in that safe environment, and being able to to start slow and having the power of your dream to move it forward, building that safe and supporting space and environment, being welcoming and inclusive, but obviously sticking to the shared vision and agreed methods of working. and helping to develop a hopeful, optimistic society where there's a visible sense of connectedness with each other and with the wider community. And in doing that, access, obviously, to training is crucial. And you might say, OK, she has a vested interest in saying that. Of course I have. I am a trainer. That's my job. That's what I do. But I know that that's what we need as well on the ground. You don't just put people into a room and say, off you go now, set up your group. There's a huge amount of work required and a huge commitment required, and I've seen it with the Amach group in Galway, the amount of hours that they've put into doing the tedious pieces of work that's required to set up an organisation, such as the governance and all the rules and roles and responsibilities attaching to that, as well as then as all the wonderful celebration of the work, which they would be well able to tell you more about in their own time. So how do we make LGBT capacity building sustainable? If we're talking about building robust structures, then how do we support them? And unfortunately, and in some ways, I suppose we've become hugely dependent on funding. And over in recent years, that funding has been, slice has been taken off it all the time. And that's impacting on the work on the ground, there's no doubt about that. It's impacting on access to support and to training and to resources. And as the purse strings tighten, obviously we'll have to look at how can we maintain this capacity building. It's a shame to let all of that go. But I think as well we need to look at other ways of sustaining ourselves other than taking funding to do it. So there's obviously a need for the long view here. We're talking, 10, 20 years down the line, what's it going to be like for us, and having that vision for that, and how can we work towards that, and investing in the people to do that rather than maybe in the resources now. Okay, all right, I have to do. So we're obviously, I suppose what we really want to do is we want to keep the power in the community, in the grassroots of the community, and it's almost like growing something. You plant the seed for something and you grow it and you nurture it. And I think national organisations and government departments have to look at how can they support to do that best. The people in the community know what they need best, and there needs to be more consultation with the local groups around their needs, around their supports for that. And I would just say that as somebody working on the ground to any national organisation or any government department there, that it's not always appropriate to be asking people to tick the box for the criteria that you have for funding. You need to be going back into the community and saying, what is it you need? And taking the gamble and giving them the chance to develop. No one is going to run away with a few bob, but give them the chance to develop for what they believe are their needs. And I'll leave it at that. So thank you very much.